I have this memory of Lauren.
Friend, athlete.
Lauren was just a wonderful young lady.
Daughter, girlfriend.
When they started dating, and she was so excited about it.
Murder victim.
She was actually on the phone talking to me and got ambushed.
How did a registered sex offender kill a girl, a star athlete at the University of Utah?
Why did this happen to her?
Maybe I was naive that I didn't know the danger that she was in.
For 21-year-old Lauren McCluskey, a 6-week relationship with Melvin Rowland would, in the end, prove deadly. A man she trusted lied about his name, age, and being a convicted sex offender. Lauren's breakup with him led to stalking, harassment, and her murder, just feet away from her dorm at the University of Utah. Years later, Lauren's parents, Jill and Matt, turned their pain into the Lauren McCluskey Foundation. Their mission, systemic change at universities. Their goal, making sure the loss stops at Lauren. This is Lauren's story. What happened, the changes made, and Lauren's evolving legacy.
Just a pleasure to have as a daughter. She was always very competitive and loved sports. And she started in track and field as a young child and really excelled in that. And that's what brought her to the University of Utah.
I ran track at the University of Utah from 2014 to 2019. We were on a track trip and she was just belting Lady Gaga, Poker Face, and like just singing, and she was just always, there to have fun. She just would go out of her way to make people feel welcome.
Lauren McCluskey grew up in Pullman, Washington. She was an athlete, an animal lover, and in her church's choir. Her mom, Jill, said that the University of Utah felt like a good fit.
I thought of Utah as a very safe place. There's a strong church attendance and membership there, and fewer people drink. And I just thought, Utah would be a safe place for her to go.
I can speak for myself of like coming into college, you're 18 when you're coming here most of the time. And I was pretty naive. Not that everyone is that way, but I think I just wasn't worried about my safety or other people's safety, and I could probably attest that most people feel that way.
Jill said that she and Lauren were very close. They spoke daily. One of those days was the first time Lauren mentioned Melvin Rowland, but by a different name.
She told me that she was dating a man and told me about him, and it seemed like she was very happy, to begin with.
She was so excited about it, and I hadn't heard anything else.
He kind of romanced her and took her out to dinner and bought her flowers and things like that. And she did want to have a boyfriend, and she was ready for that stage of her life.
And that was only like a month before she was murdered, so it had escalated so quickly.
I didn't want to be the overly helicopter mom that would try to interfere with things. But then she told me that she found out that he lied to her and that she was breaking up with him.
I kept thinking I should have talked to her more about it, so that's pretty much the extent of what I knew about the relationship at that time.
Jill encouraged Lauren to speak with the counselor as she navigated her breakup.
I said that, you should make an appointment with your counselor and tell her everything, if you're not telling me everything. And I know she did that, and she actually had an appointment with her counselor on the day she was murdered. So I was hoping that, anything she wasn't telling me, that she was at least talking with people who could help. And I was more worried about what this guy was doing would hurt her mentally. I didn't really know I didn't really know all the risks. And I reported it to the police. I thought the police knew about it and would help her also. And she said that she thought she was bothering them. And I said, well, that's their job. And keep talking to them.
Lauren would go on to call the University of Utah's campus police several times. When they failed to follow up on her case, she contacted the Salt Lake City police. She told her university that she didn't feel safe. Soon, the university's inaction would lead to Lauren's and her parents' biggest fear.
It was October 22nd of 2018, and I was working the night shift as a general assignment reporter at KUTV.
She was actually on the phone talking to me and got ambushed. I realized that she was in danger. We didn't know what happened to her. I thought she was kidnapped. I was hoping she'd be okay, but I was so worried about that we might lose her.
Based on what I was hearing on the police scanner, that the officers were concerned about somebody being shot. They were concerned about this girl named Lauren, and they were also looking for a guy named Melvin. And I remember scratching down on a piece of paper, Melvin Rowland, and I ran over to our assignment editor. I handed him the paper and I said, I think that Jay and I need to get up to the University of Utah campus right now because I think they've had a shooting. So we get to the scene in the U campus and we made contact with one of the officers, and I said, where do you want media to go on this? About 9:52, and I remember very distinctly, I was standing about 20 feet away from a police officer who was searching cars in the parking lot when I just heard this U of U officer just start yelling that he had somebody who'd been shot, or he said something to the effect of, I have a body, I have a body. And at that moment, it was like everything went from 0 to 100, because now we have a shooting victim. Somebody's been shot on the campus. We're 5 minutes from air for our 10 o'clock broadcast, and this is all blowing up right in front of us.
This is breaking news from 2 News.
Shauna, this is a very intense scene up here at the University of Utah. We want to explain to you, this is just to the south side of the South Tower. While we've been out here in the last 10 minutes, we're going to be careful about what we show you. We saw officers start running towards a car. They said that they had found a body inside of that car. We've confirmed that there's somebody in that car. We're told that person may have multiple gunshot wounds. We've heard some firefighters that are coming into the area.
In the hours after Lauren's murder, investigators ID'd Melvin Rowland as a suspect.
Quickly, I started running him through courts, and I go, oh, this guy's a registered sex offender. He seemed a little bit older, and I remember in my mind thinking there was a little bit of confusion as to what connection would this guy who's a sex offender, who'd been to prison, what connection is he going to have to a student at the University of Utah? Or what connection does he have to campus?
A picture of who Melvin Rowland was started to form as Salt Lake City police worked to track him down. Around 2 a.m., the manhunt ends with Rowland shooting himself inside a church.
And now the questions were, what in the world led up to this terrible situation playing out on campus? It was a tale that started to unravel, and everything we found out was just more horrifying than the last thing, because it was very clear very quickly that Lauren McCluskey did what she was supposed to do as a victim of crime. She went to the police, she documented things, she advocated for herself, and ultimately that system completely failed her and she was killed.
The university brought in Keith Squires, a well-respected figure in Utah law enforcement, to lead an independent investigation into how the police department handled Lauren's numerous reports against Rowland.
So, Keith, I want to get into some specifics of your findings in your investigation. I know that there's a report, but what were the key standouts for you?
Well, the key standouts were that there just weren't the levels of supervision and engagement at all levels, not only within the police department, but with the police department's interaction with other resources and departments that are available on campus. And so those were things that were glaring.
Obviously, there were some systematic issues, communication issues. But how do you change culture? It seems like a very daunting task.
Well, one of the challenges that you have in any community is for the people to feel that they are serving as public safety representatives, police officers, a part of that community. It should never be that the police department and the officers are policing these people. It is, we are here to protect and help our community that we are a part of. And sometimes that can be a little bit different when you look at a university setting, but it shouldn't be.
The university's response early on was just sort of one that they really initially sort of defended their officers, and then it would take those subsequent investigations to sort of reveal, they did have some major problems. And I think one of the most shocking moments in all that was Officer Darris, who was accused of showing Lauren's intimate photos to coworkers. That has been really a flashpoint in the story, and people wanted answers. Did your officer show intimate photos of Lauren and brag about having access to them at any time? Just everything, it seemed, in the public mind, in the public image of the university at the time, was failure after failure after failure, and that Lauren McCluskey paid for it with her life.
Did you feel like there was a culture at the school at the time of not believing women or not taking them seriously?
At the time when we were living it, I didn't understand that. But in looking back on it, of course, that was the case. There were a few things that really did not sit right with me, and really two things. One was that there would be no disciplinary action against anyone in Lauren's case. Second one is when the former president, Ruth Watkins, said that we don't think that this tragedy could have been prevented. Working with a lawyer was really our only recourse, and we are not really litigious people.
After Lauren's murder, the Mccluskys sued the University of Utah for negligence.
I want to start, all three of you have a different perspective on this case.
We invited the Mccluskys' lawyer, Jim McConkey, former state senator Janny Iwamoto, and Keith Squires to sit down for a conversation about the legal and legislative failures of the university and what they've done to make sure what happened to Lauren never happens again.
You work in different fields. I want to just get your general thoughts on where some of the failures in the system were that didn't protect Lauren from her abuser and ultimately her murderer.
One of the big ones is that the police, there's a campus police, and then there's the Salt Lake Police Department. But we know that for student crime doesn't just stop at the border. And so there's confusion as to who to call, and that was a major issue of governance, I think.
There were programs in place at the University of Utah to help protect students. For example, housing. They had reports that could be made if there were problems that were occurring of a sexual nature, of any kind of a nature, in their living situation. The police were involved. They were supposed to communicate. And from our perspective, what happened is those systems weren't working. And when there were signs of danger and information was reported, it wasn't shared between housing and the police department. And then as the situation became more egregious and dangerous, the police failed to respond to critical information that they had from Lauren herself. She reported to the police.
Ultimately, a police officer has to be a problem solver, and a department has to have things in place related to their policies, procedures, but especially their structure. I knew from my very first days as an officer that anything that I did not have the resources for on that call, that I had a sergeant that I could go to who would be aware of and able to find other ways that we can deal with this current situation. And if he couldn't, there's a lieutenant, and ultimately up to the chief of police. And had those things been in place, and better things could have been managed in that first hours and days.
Since Squires' independent investigation, he has joined the university as the chief safety officer. He now works to change the campus police department from the inside.
I want to ask you, Keith, how you have tackled that silo effect of the lack of sharing of information that may prevent someone from getting the help they need.
It's been a great process, but a long process. It involves having to hire the right people and put them in the positions, people whose heart is in the work, who genuinely care. And from that, as I mentioned before, making sure that whatever it is that we're being asked to help with here on campus and for our community, that all of the resources which this university has so much to offer for victims of crime is available to them. Having victims advocates as part of our department that work with the officers every day. Their job's not only in those first hours of helping that individual, but also as they go forth, and have to navigate the criminal justice system and all that comes with that.
You mentioned caring and also getting the right people in the positions. I want to ask about the sensitive photos that were found to have been shared between police officers, and to me that seems like a glaring representation of how someone thinks about women and thinks about women who have been victimized. How do you root that out of a university, out of a police department, out of a culture?
It is a shock when I do see an incident that happens like this, and then it's a matter of that department and going into, again, the culture and holding individuals accountable, making sure that anything that's presented as a complaint is investigated thoroughly and appropriate action taken.
To give you an example of the depth of the cultural problem, when we were involved in the case, there were women police officers on the force who came to our office as well, and we have interviews, and they had filed complaints, and the relationship between the male and the female officers in the department was horrible, and there was sexual discrimination and harassment that I wouldn't even feel comfortable describing in this setting. And so it was a deep-rooted problem that became apparent when a tragedy occurred later.
So the levels of the barriers for women dealing with the police force, working in the police force, goes really quite deep. And you mentioned reporting. And I want to ask about, from all of your experiences, what the difficulties there are with reporting, whether that is intimate partner violence or workplace inequality when it comes to gender. What is the barrier there?
I think what happened is these women in the department, we need more women in the department. That I think would help change the culture as quickly as you possibly could.
I feel like that's something that's still a problem in our country, and everything that people don't believe, the victims as much. And so I think keeping the light on it.
Former State Senator Iwamoto has co-written and sponsored numerous campus safety bills, including Senate Bill 126, which outlines an officer's duty to intervene or report misconduct.
There are bad apples, in everything we do, and there's bad apples that happened at this, I feel. We have to change the culture, and that culture means reporting your own to protect them and others.
Keith, any thoughts on that? Has there been a shift in the demographics in the police department on campus or anything like that?
Absolutely. This department is a totally different department. Last time I checked, 93% of the officers that work here now were not here when Lauren was murdered. Our world is all about prevention. If we can prevent someone from being harmed, that's our ultimate goal. And unfortunately, there is, as you've expressed, individuals who feel like there's so much against them. If I bring this forward, will I be thought of differently? How will I be treated? That is our driving area of concern.
Years ago, it was very difficult to win these cases. You really had to think twice before you presented a case to a jury, because the male always had the advantage. And that's not the case now. There's a greater likelihood that the testimony of the woman will be listened to, and they'll believe that she's more credible.
A way that we've dealt with our grief over losing Lauren was to try to make a positive change, to make a difference.
2 years after Lauren's murder, the Mccluskys reached a $13.5 million settlement with the University of Utah. They used it to start the Lauren McCluskey Foundation.
Our mission is really to change the culture that responds poorly to relationship violence and stalking, and that's really what happened. Just a poor response that they They didn't care. They were unprofessional. They didn't treat her with respect and dignity. But then there's so many failures across the entire system. And with the funds from the lawsuit, it's possible to do that.
I was sexually assaulted on campus just in my second month of college.
Celine Beth Olson is a University of Utah graduate and a few years older than Lauren.
It was something that has stayed with me for so many years. I did go and report it to the police about a few months later. I unfortunately did not take a rape kit at the time because I didn't even know they existed. But by the point when I got to the police department and reporting my assault, there wasn't much urgency. There wasn't really anything created for me where I felt safe in that environment.
Years after her assault, Celine continues to take action, including joining the Mccluskey Foundation.
This is such a fantastic thing to watch grow over these years, especially from Lauren's Promise all the way through to where we're at today with Lauren's Lab.
Can you tell me a little bit about Lauren's Promise?
Yeah. Lauren's Promise is the promise that you will believe someone if someone is threatening you. This is a promise or a pledge that has been made across over 330 universities. It's really a movement that I stand behind, and it makes me so happy that, something like that is just being talked about. And it is all about believing survivors and making sure that they are heard and seen.
I thought, what could I have done as a professor if I have a student like Lauren that was facing these challenges, and people did not listen to her, but sometimes they might listen to me as a professor. And so if I put that on my course syllabus, then that invites someone to come and tell me, and then I can put them in touch with resources and maybe speak on their behalf, advocate for them. And that could have made all the difference for Lauren.
Lauren did everything right. She knew exactly where to go and what to report, and she did so in such a vulnerable manner too. And I hope that people who take this pledge really look into her story, really look into who Lauren was.
Us educating not just, students, but like professionals in this field right around this. And I think Jill Mccluskey has done a great job, and they've partnered with SASCO to train law enforcement and other professionals, because being trauma informed is super important, and just believing. And sadly, Lauren wasn't believed.
SASCO is a nonprofit that offers self-defense classes for women and girls.
I've spoken with Keith, and I know he's a very well-respected person in Utah law enforcement. What changes have you seen being ushered in with his taking on this role?
So many things. Really professionalism, training, but also caring.
SASCO also partners with the Lauren McCluskey Foundation to teach law enforcement to better speak to and work with victims of trauma and abuse. Mesa, Lauren's former teammate, volunteers with SASCO, teaching self-defense.
It seems like you've taken on a role in your life to help other women, other victims, not just women, but other victims. Why did you go into this field?
Obviously, after Lauren was murdered, I was left with a lot of questions. One being, why did this happen to her? One being, why wasn't she believed? And why is this such a big problem that's not being talked about? And once I kind of opened the door and saw all of it, I couldn't unsee it, and I just knew I needed to do something rather than to stand by. And it's my way to kind of honor her, and like I said, let her light shine. And yeah, now that I've done that, it's also healing for me to, hopefully help at least one person. To me, if I help at least one person, that's enough for me.
I have met so many other incredible survivors, and a lot of university students reached out, and those who were alumni to present day. I even had a a previous law enforcer who was on campus and reach out to me and say, hey, I'm so sorry.
Do you feel like there's been a shift in the broader culture around the conversations of sexual assault or intimate partner violence?
Yeah, I do think it is starting to change. I think there is more of knowledge of it, especially post Me Too. That was a time where I felt like, oh, I am safe by saying I'm a survivor. I shouldn't be ashamed of it. But still, even today, I'm still peeling away those layers.
What do you think Lauren's legacy is here?
I think her legacy will live on for a long time. And I think the Lauren McCluskey Foundation, Lauren's parents, so many have made sure that it does.
Lauren's legacy, a big part of it will be that she made a difference for women, young women, to be safer as they go away to college.
I think her story got so much attention because she was wronged in so many ways, that so many people have changed what they were doing.
Because of the way she advocated for herself and was not heard, and that a light was shined on that in the future more women will be heard.
And I hope her legacy is, instill change and to never dismiss anyone again. I hope that's her legacy.
Faculty from 339 universities across the world have made Lauren's promise. The Lauren McCluskey Foundation also hosts Lauren's Lap, a race for campus safety that raises awareness and support for victims of domestic abuse and stalking. If you're interested in getting involved with the Lauren McCluskey Foundation or donating your time or funds to the cause, please visit laurenmccluskey.org. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please consider the following resources.